Released in 2016, iOS 10 brought a new lock screen, new control center, and honestly not much else. But it worked, and that's what was really important.
Hey, how's it going, guys? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and today we're going to be talking about why iOS 10 is the best we've seen of modern iOS.
iOS 10 wasn't perfect by any means, don't get me wrong. This video isn't talking about how iOS 10 is better than everything else because frankly, it isn't. But I do think that it represents the best of the modern era of iOS, given that it was stable, performed well, and at the end of the day just kind of worked. It's probably the closest Apple has gotten to replicating the success of iOS 6, the last iteration of the classic look Steve Jobs loved. I have here today Hugh Jeffreys, who's going to be helping me out with this video and is also going to be posting a video on iOS 6, so I'll have a link down below if you want to go see that. But anyways, let's get started. iOS 10 was awesome because it brought more of the consistency that Apple is, or at least was, known for. iOS 10 is only great when you're looking at the full context and at what iOS has kind of become. iOS 11 hasn't gone over very well, with seemingly unending issues constantly affecting people. Not that iOS 11 is complete garbage, because it isn't, but it isn't consistent either, and the sheer amount of problems people have been experiencing can't be understated. And so the stark contrast iOS 10 brings really makes the older OS look better, even if it isn't as good as 6 was, or even that special in any way. It just worked while bringing in a few cool new features. And why can't iOS always be like that? Probably the best thing about iOS 10 was how well it performed. Everything was fast, and there weren't any super irritating bugs at launch that made things feel slow, unlike iOS 11. For example, do you remember how in iOS 11 if you force touched an app there would be lag? It was such a simple little thing, but the fact that even that didn't work properly was definitely a sign of the issues to come. iOS 10 wasn't like that. It had its problems at launch, but it was still pretty fast, and it didn't have nearly as many bugs. Sure, there were some bugs here and there still, there always are, but it still felt very polished and like something Apple would normally release. And what's more, it was fast. The iPhone 7 ran it amazingly well, and the success felt great on it. And so did the rest of Apple's lineup for that matter. Let's quickly turn over to Hugh to look at that a little bit more closely.
Thanks, Josh, and thanks, mate, for having me in your video today. If you guys don't know who I am Hugh Jeffreys. I make iPhone videos, anything from pretty much fixing them up and comparing them and all that kind of stuff. So if you guys are interested in iPhone related videos, which no doubt you are if you're watching Josh's amazing quality videos, go ahead and check me out. Link will be down in the description. Now, Josh has asked me today to talk a little bit about iOS 10 and my personal thoughts on iOS 10. Now, iOS 10 has to be hands down one of the most reliable versions of iOS released. iOS 10 ran on over 20 different Apple devices, from the iPhone 5 all the way up to the iPhone 7, the iPad 4 all the way up to the iPad Pros. And one of the great features about iOS 10 is how well it performed on these devices. It wasn't perfect, but it ran really well even on the iPhone 5 and 5C. Now, I actually used an iPhone 5 and 5S on iOS 10 when it sort of first came out, and I have to say that they ran really well as my daily driving phones. Before I got the iPhone 7, which is also on iOS 10, I have not updated that to iOS 11, and the reason for that is iOS 11 had a bit of a bumpy start, and then I just decided that iOS 10 worked just fine for what I use my phone for, and there was no need to update to iOS 11. And iOS 10 runs perfectly on all those devices, just as iOS 6 did back in 2012 and 2013. I'd like to thank Josh for having me in this video today, and if you'd like to check out my video featuring Josh and why I think iOS 6 is the best classic version of iOS, go ahead, link will be down in the description. That's all from me, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Josh from 91 Tech.
So Apple did well with iOS 10. It didn't kill any phones like iOS 9 did with the 4S, and it was just good. You didn't really think about it too much when it was the current update, but now that it's in the past, I kind of miss it. But am I wrong? Was iOS 10 not that great? Am I overrating it right now? A few weeks ago, I posted a little vote on the community tab of my channel, and it got an insane 10,000 votes, which is crazy. Some of my videos don't even get 10,000 views. Where are you guys at? But anyways, the vote asked how people look back on iOS 10, and how how they thought it compared to iOS 11. 18% said iOS 10 was amazing and one of the best iOS versions ever. 48% said iOS 10 wasn't great, but still better than iOS 11. 29% said iOS 10 was okay, but iOS 11 is better. And then 5% said that iOS 10 was terrible. These weren't especially surprising results for me. Combining some of the vote numbers, 66% of people think iOS 10 is better than 11. So I do have most people behind me here, but that doesn't necessarily make me right. There was one comment in particular I found really insightful and well written, so I'll quickly read it out here. And by the way, there were over 160 comments, so I didn't read everybody's, but I did read a good few. Anyways, this guy wrote that most of the people who speak of iOS 10 as if it's one of the greatest OSs of all time and the pinnacle of software are mostly speaking through nostalgia. iOS 10 was pretty good, but that's about it. Performance and battery were pretty good in the later versions and definitely better than iOS 11, but I still feel that most of the praise it gets is largely down to iOS 11's catastrophic release. He continues, and you can read it if you want, but this is the part that stood out to me. This, in my opinion, is actually a really good analysis and a very fair point, which was a nice change from the typical iOS 11 is crap comments, which is justified. A lot of people have had problems, but still, you know, it's nice to see something different. But just to counter this guy a little bit, I don't think that people are at the point that iOS 10 can even be looked at nostalgically. Maybe in some cases, but for me, it hasn't been long enough. I have some nostalgia for iOS 8 because I really enjoyed jailbreaking and messing around with it, but for me it doesn't go any further than that. In fact, I missed out on a good portion of iOS 10's time due to me sticking with iOS 9 because I was jailbroken. Eventually I did update, mostly because of the channel, actually, but even so, while it might be true for some, I personally am not very nostalgic about iOS 10. What I liked about it was that it was pretty good, even if that was about it. The praise might be coming down to iOS 11's catastrophic release, but I still think that's a decent reason. iOS 10 was good. It didn't need to be any more than just good. It was better than 7, 8, 9, and that's all it really had to do. But iOS 11 couldn't keep that up, and that's why, in my opinion, iOS 10 represents the best of modern iOS. I'm actually kind of a unique case, I think, because I used a lot of different versions of Apple devices with iOS 10. When it first released, I had my iPod 6th generation, and for a few months there I stuck with iOS 9 because I was jailbroken, but I eventually updated, and then shortly after I upgraded to the iPhone 6 and used that for, you know, a good few months, and then I upgraded to the iPhone 6S. I did this all within the time that iOS 10 was a thing, and there was something that was very surprising. iOS 10 worked, and it ran fast on all of those devices. iOS 10 was simple, and it did the job, just like a certain other iteration of iOS that a couple people like. In conclusion, there's one reason iOS 10 is great. It's because 11 isn't, and therefore that makes iOS 10 the best iteration we've seen since iOS 6, and in all honesty, that's not really a good thing. iOS 12 is just on the horizon, and supposedly it's going to be more of a stability and performance update. Hopefully Apple will go back to their roots and prove this to be true. We desperately need this. Again, iOS 11 isn't awful, but for a lot of people it kind of is. While the amount of things Apple has fixed is impressive over this time span of iOS 11, and the amount of updates they've released is pretty crazy, and don't get me wrong, I'm very glad they've been working to make things better. I think that's a good sign. At the end of the day, iOS 11 should not have been released the way it was. iOS 10 worked, and that's all it had to do. It was never perfect, but again, it didn't have to be. It just had to be usable for the millions of iOS users out there, and it was. And I think that's where I'm going to end this video today. Big thank you to Hugh Jeffreys for his input on iOS 10, and make sure you go check out his video on iOS 6, which I actually show up in for a little bit. And while you're over there, maybe take a look at the rest of his content, because he does a lot of cool videos relating to iPhones, and I think a lot of you will like his stuff. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video interesting at all, make sure you hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content just like this. You can follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, direct links down below. And with that all being said, I am Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.